Let me go back to last January. I was so worried. I joined with millions of children and young people worldwide, Fridays for Future, saying, why are we not taking climate more seriously? And in particular, I had a climate justice perspective, which means more concerned about people and a strong gender dimension and a very strong dimension of thinking about more vulnerable people, small island states, poorer countries, indigenous communities, poorer communities in richer countries. And the fact that women were in the front line. And I was so worried because we were not taking action. And 2020 was the year when we were supposed to take a lot of action, do very ambitious, nationally determined contributions, but there was no sign of the kind of leadership that we were going to need. And, you know, in March, on the 10th of March, the UN Secretary General said we were way off track in meeting our climate commitments. So that was a crisis of great gravity that we were not taking seriously enough. And then somehow on top of that, we have the sudden, dramatic, earth-shaking COVID-19, which has turned our whole world upside down, which is devastating lives, health, livelihoods, economies. We're in a global recession. It's a pandemic. Suddenly, we're facing a terrible reality, and people have responded incredibly. They have responded by changing their behavior, by suddenly being prepared to social distance, to stay in their homes, to practice what will be good for the health of others. People are thinking of the elderly in their community, the more vulnerable in their community, the health workers who are on the front lines, that they need to be more protected. So we have collectively seen a sort of people power, people agency, being involved as part of the solution. We can't do it without this people agency. And that's the first lesson, a very, very important lesson. And then look at what's happening. The community spirit that we're seeing, led by women, women leaders in their communities, showing a neighborliness, showing a capacity to respond. Look at the coalitions that we're seeing for innovation, coalitions between scientists, business people, medical experts, governments, everybody turning from, you know, making motor cars to making ventilators. All of this, that's the innovation we're going to need in the future for the other crisis, which is just as serious. And I think also we're somehow more human in our empathy. What I used to find talking about climate justice, and I would talk about small island states and the least developed countries and indigenous communities, and we'll hear Hindu speaking for the indigenous wisdom and the way to address climate change by listening to the indigenous. But somehow people felt this isn't me, and it didn't touch the heart. Now it's me and you and all of us, and we're all very worried about now, very worried about the next few weeks, the next few months, the future. And it's created that empathy, that sense of purpose. I hope that, you know, one thing we could do is to say that 2019 should be the peak year for the global emissions that are hurting our world. Scientists have been saying over and over again that we have to reduce global emissions by 45% in the next 10 years. That's not long for a huge change. We're seeing huge change. This is very hopeful. I'm actually more hopeful than I was last January, that we're going to actually be able to learn these lessons and work through them. And it's women and girls and women leaders and young people who are going to guide us and who are going to insist we do it differently, because we were not living sustainably. We have to have a green, resilient, equitable future, and it's going to take all of us.